Hello, my name's Paul Thomas Peter and I'm dying of cancer. In November 2018, Jim Reed from the Victoria Derbyshire programme came and interviewed me and filmed me in my house for about 4 hours on the subjects of crowdfunding and for cancer treatment overseas and also overseas clinics. He told me he was doing balance pieces which would not just trash the clinic I went to, because I'd told him that if that's what he was doing I didn't really want to be involved in it. The pieces went out on the 6th and 7th of March, just the other week, and the first one on crowdfunding was actually pretty good. It made some really good points and I'd like to follow up on some of them. And the second one went out the following day and it was the most badly researched, poorly evidenced piece of journalism I've seen for an awful long time. It was essentially a hatchet job on the Hallwang Clinic in Germany. And they're a pretty easy target, but they saved my life in 2017. I've had 2 years of really good quality life to date because of that clinic, and solely because of that clinic. So I want to do an answer piece to those two pieces and maybe put a bit more balance into it. I'm dying of cancer. I've been overseas to that clinic. I've met a lot of other patients. I know people's stories. I know the ins and outs of having to go, why I went for cancer treatment. And I also know that there's a real problem in the UK that forces a lot of people to go overseas searching for treatment. And I'd just like to address some of the things they bring up and put maybe a more balanced view, and also discuss the clinic as well. It's not perfect in any way, but it saved my life 2 years ago and I can't be anything but grateful to them for that. I still keep in touch with them. I run treatment options past them and I chat to them. I've willingly given a testimonial to them, and if I could afford it I would go back there tomorrow because their treatment is good. So what I've done here is I've taken the two pieces, I've edited out anything that wasn't to do with the two pieces that I was being filmed for, and I've put them together in one video so you can watch the programmes without me interrupting and making points, so you can see them as they went out and make your own impression. I then have made another video which will be below this one in my blog, and I've put a link to my blog in the comments below here, and that will have me interspersing. So if you don't want to sit through 30 minutes of the programme on its own and you're happy to skip to the next video, you should really do that now. And then after that I'm going to put more detail into a blog post about what I've said in the video. So you can have a look at as much or as little as you want, really. If you're an absolute pedant like me, you'll want to read the whole thing. Or if you're a solicitor coming to get me because the BBC are miffed at my answer, then again you'll want to read the whole thing. Have I actually evidenced it? Have I actually been fair? Have I made any sweeping statements without backing them up? I don't think I have, but have a look. See if you can find it. I actually think the Victoria Derbyshire programme made a lot of sweeping statements without backing them up with any evidence, and they're very influential, they're very impressionable to people. They make statements and people believe it. They present their programmes as a factual news programme, and they even put their exclusive stories in amongst a bit of here's a newsreader and here's the news, and they intersperse it in between the real news items, and they get on the BBC News website and other people pick them up and just carry on the same reporting, and no one's actually checked their facts. So anyway, without me waffling on anymore, I've put my glasses on so I look a bit more distinguished, but I found it difficult to keep a straight face in all this. I'm still here, I'm still alive, I'm still cheerful, and it's National World Happiness Day today, so I'm actually quite happy, but I've made these pieces. So you can watch them both now completely clean, without just all the extra stuff edited out that isn't relevant, or you can skip straight down to the next video and see it with me and my comments in. I'll be the droning Yorkshireman. I haven't got the same facilities as the BBC, so I'm in my loft, film myself on my phone, and I don't do this very often, so it's incredibly unprofessional, but I hope you get the gist of it. Thank you very much.
Hello, it's Wednesday, it's 10 o'clock on Victoria Derbyshire. Good morning. Our exclusive story today, an investigation for this programme has found that more than £20 million was raised on crowdfunding sites last year for cancer treatment not available on the NHS.
You just think, where am I going to get that money from? Where am I going to get that money from? And it was like fundraising, crowdfunding page. It was just absolutely, how can I put it? It was draining.
Doctors and charities are warning that crowdfunding can put families under even more pressure when they're at their most vulnerable. And the biggest of them all, GoFundMe, says it's changing its website in the light of our investigation. Have you crowdfunded for cancer treatment abroad? Do let us know. Let us know how much you raised and also whether it was worth it. Before all that, Anita has the news.
Thank you, Victoria. Good morning, everyone. The Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, is meeting police chiefs from 7 forces most affected by violent crime. He's facing calls to treat a series of fatal stabbings as a national emergency. Last night, a teenager was charged with the murder of Yusuf Maki, the 17-year-old boy who was stabbed to death in Greater Manchester on Saturday. A man has also been arrested in connection with the murder of a 17-year-old girl, Jodie Chesney, in East London on Friday. More than £20 million was raised on crowdfunding sites last year for cancer treatment not available on the NHS, an investigation for this programme has found. The amount has been rising, sharply driven by the growth of social media campaigns and an increase in overseas clinics. But there are fears from doctors and charities that the rise in crowdfunding can put vulnerable families under even more pressure and rob them of precious time with their dying relatives.
You've got to really sit down and as a family and say to yourself, if we do this and we end up destitute with nothing and it doesn't work, where are we going to be? And that is the most important, terrifying, ridiculous decision that you're ever going to make in your life.
That's a summary of the main news today. Back to you, Victoria.
Thank you very much. So let's bring you our exclusive story today. More than £20 million was raised on crowdfunding sites last year for cancer treatment not available here on the NHS, an investigation for this programme has found. The amount has been rising sharply each year, driven by access to overseas clinics and the growth of social media campaigns. But there are fears from doctors and charities that the rise of crowdfunding can put families under even more pressure when they're at their most vulnerable. And in the light of our investigation, the largest crowdfunding site, the US-based GoFundMe, tells us it's going to start directing cancer patients and their families to scientific advice on treatments. Our reporter Jim Reid has this exclusive film.
I'm terrified, if I'm completely honest. I've had 20 cycles of chemotherapy now. I think realistically, we're looking for a miracle.
This is what life can now look like after a cancer diagnosis.
Got the ferry at Dover. We went over France, Belgium, Netherlands, into Germany. 11-hour journey in an ambulance.
Millions are being raised online for treatments, often unproven and untested.
Without the public's donations and her donations, I think it'd be a total different story.
But with this new form of funding comes a new type of pressure. Helen lives in the hills in Lancashire. Her daughter Gemma was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2014. She was pregnant and put off treatment until she gave birth.
Gemma was extremely poorly. She was absolutely exhausted, obviously, from having the baby anyway. Backwards and forwards to the hospital. It was just madness.
For a while, chemotherapy worked, but then Gemma fell ill again. She was told nothing more could be done on the NHS.
I just thought, well, that's not happening. I'm not losing her. She's 28 years old. She's got a baby of her own. I need to do something, and that's when I started looking for alternative treatments, whether it was in this country or anywhere else in the world for that matter. And I just jumped on the internet and started researching.
Until recently, terminal cancer patients had few treatment options. Now the choice can be overwhelming, from private doctors in the UK to drug trials and clinics abroad.
Are you seeing a rise in people coming to you asking about treatment overseas?
Without doubt. Because our internet doesn't have boundaries, doesn't have geographical boundaries, and if you can see a treatment in Germany, you can go and find out about that. And of course, you can't believe that there's no such thing. What do you mean there's no treatment? We can get a man to the moon. Of course you can find something that can extend my life. We just can't believe that's the case. So our ability to go and find out more about that is accelerated.
Gemma wanted access to immunotherapy drugs not approved for NHS use. A private clinic in Germany said it could offer the treatment.
You're completely stressed out as it is. Like, well, how do I do that? How do I do that? Who do I ring? How do I get there? How am I going to do this? And then you've got the added pressure, which is the biggest pressure of all, which is where the hell are we going to get the money from to do this? Because once you realise what you've got to do, you've got to work out how you're going to pay for it.
The family sold a house and took out loans. A crowdfunding campaign was started online, raising £16,000. The clinic, though, wanted £100,000 just to start treatment.
I don't know if you can see it. But
Then an email arrived. Helen thought it was fake at first, from someone saying they worked for Kate Winslet.
Incredible. I feel so blessed that I could help. What do you say?
The actress who'd read Gemma's story raised money, and the publicity boosted crowdfunding from the public. Gemma did make it to Germany, and for a while the treatment seemed to work.
Thank you so much for all your hard work and me being able to have my treatment that I really did need.
But in Gemma's case, any success was short-lived. The cancer came back. After 7 trips to that clinic, she died in the UK in October.
Didn't want to come back.
Helen is very thankful for the support, both from Kate Winslet and the public, but says others need to think very hard before making a similar decision.
Everybody that we met over there, not one of them's here anymore. And then there were a lot of people sold everything that they owned. They threw the kitchen sink at it. You've got to really sit down and as a family and say to yourself, if we do this and we end up destitute with nothing and it doesn't work, where are we going to be? And that is the most important, terrifying, ridiculous decision that you're ever going to make in your life.
This programme has found, over the last year, more than £20 million has been raised on crowdfunding sites for cancer treatment not available on the NHS. In some cases, that's helped pay for trials abroad or cutting-edge treatment at hospitals or universities. Charities then say crowdfunding can be a force for good, but there are real concerns about the pressure it can also put on families.
It's a new option, but in our experience, we have found that some families feel as though they have to do it. They feel pressurised into doing it because it's something that we've all heard of now, that we see it a lot on the internet. If you're a regular Facebooker, you've probably seen a fair old handful of children who need treatment. So for some families, it feels like an obligation that if you haven't tried this, are you a good parent? And that's a very, very difficult position to be in.
Other families we've spoken to also say they felt very uneasy posting photos online of their children, often very sick. But the harsh reality of crowdfunding is that it's often the most hard-hitting stories that raise the most money.
And these under my arms, you could feel them.
That has implications for people like Paul, a former army officer who served in Northern Ireland. Diagnosed with terminal skin cancer, he raised money from friends and family, but his wider crowdfunding campaign struggled.
I haven't got a story that grabs people. I was nearly 60 at the time. I've got no children and not many dependents. Without having a really compelling story, you're not going to raise a lot of money on crowdfunding because there's just so many people trying to raise money and you disappear into it.
When they say to you there's nothing more they can do, you want to battle on, you want to fight it.
Dave Greenwood is opening up shop in Stockport.
Because you do the Oscars at school, don't
This
you?
wedding events business was all his wife Heidi's idea.
She never took a wage from it. Up until the day she passed away, she never took a wage from it. And it was just amazing what she did.
Heidi died from cancer just a month before we filmed, leaving Dave, their son, and 5 other children.
It feels like your feet are stuck to the floor and you sink into the seat when you hear that word tumour. And you go, is it cancerous? And you're thinking then, how long's she got? What do we need to do now?
Dave had seen the news about Kate Winslet. At the time, Gemma's case was being widely reported as close to a miracle cure.
Yeah, time for these up.
He wanted the same, treatment in Germany that he hoped could save his wife's life.
You just think, where am I going to get that money from? Where am I going to get that money from? And it was like fundraising, crowdfunding page. And it was just hard work. How can I put it? It was draining.
Dave says his first quote from the clinic was £75,000. When they got to Germany, he says they were told to come back every 3 weeks at a cost of £39,000 a time.
You're trying to focus on your family, but then in the back of your mind you've got £39,000 to try and raise to get her back there, and you're looking at it and it's like a time bomb, and it's going and going and going.
Thousands were raised online. Dave took money out of the business and friends made their own donations, but in the end it just wasn't enough.
She didn't manage to get back on the 10th of September because we just didn't get enough funds in to do it.
And how did you feel about not going back?
I wanted to get back there. Everyone stepped up to try and raise money, and everyone was sharing the crowdfunding page. And you could see there was days where you get £500 in, there was days where you get nothing in, and you're just thinking, we're not going to get there, and we're not going to get there, and then you're just thinking, stop being stupid, you've got to plod on, you've got to keep going.
It's incredibly stressful, Dave.
It is, and we didn't even have near to the 39,000 to get back there.
Heidi's one trip to Germany cost around £75,000. Elsewhere in Europe, Turkish clinics are popular. For childhood cancers, it's Mexico or the US.
We're talking £100,000, £200,000, £300,000. I mean, it's an awful lot of money for anyone. I guess the question is, can it be justified?
Would you put a value on a child's life? Never. A cynic might question why all of the clinics seem to charge roughly the same amount of money to provide very, very different treatments. So it's almost as if some clinics have worked out this is the right amount, or the amount that most families would pay.
She was a young mother. She was about sort of in her 40s at the time, just approaching her 40s. She was a very outgoing person herself. She was quite humorous.
Ritendra's sister Rebecca was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2013. Again, she looked for treatment overseas. Again, she ended up in Germany.
We've heard stories about people who'd been airlifted into the clinic, and then they were walking out. You know, they were being wheeled in and then walking out themselves and skipping back home, literally.
The families say they were told for most patients like Rebecca, the cancer had gone into remission. In her case, though, it wasn't to be. It spread and she was too sick to bring home. She died in the clinic in Germany.
All that she could think about was just seeing her two boys again. I can't imagine what it must... Can't really imagine what it must have been like for her. But it was that sense of hope.
To pay for treatment, there was a crowdfunding page, but most of the money came from family. Ritendra says the final bill was more than £2 million.
My mother, she put her savings into it. We had sort of property as well within the family. That's all been mortgaged up. And even that wasn't enough. I mean, there was a certain idea what the cost could be, but it seemed to be increasing. And of course, Rebecca's not going to get treatment until the bills are being paid. It's a struggle. It still is a struggle for us. It's left its mark. There are sort of elements of the family who aren't talking to each other. It's breaking up. It's breaking up the family, and that really hurts Mum.
With that in mind, this is a difficult question to ask, but was it worth it? Was it worth putting all that money into your sister's treatment?
It's not a question. I understand why one would ask such a thing, but I don't know if it's a relevant question anymore. How can you measure such a thing?
It's a decision that most people didn't have to make, even 5 years ago. Crowdfunding is fueling the growth of overseas clinics. That's encouraging more online campaigns. Some lives may have been extended or perhaps even saved as a result. The cost, though, both financially and emotionally, to the families involved is impossible to calculate.
And Jim is here. All three of the families featured in your film went to Germany. How common is that?
It's very common, and it's becoming more popular, especially for cancer care. There are a huge number of clinics now offering kind of private treatment for cancer therapies. There will actually be a lot more about that on the programme tomorrow. As for the clinic featured in that film, actually treated all three of those patients. They told us they do have patients' best interests at heart. They claim they are very successful, as they put it, in extremely difficult situations. And on the cost point, they do point out they have one specialist cancer doctor for every 2 to 3 patients and a nurse-patient ratio, as they put it, of nearly 1 to 1.
And your investigation is already having an impact. The biggest crowdfunding website is going to start directing fundraisers, it says, to trusted information on cancer treatments.
Yeah, this is one of the big issues that families keep telling us, which is after a cancer diagnosis, they just really don't know where to turn. So GoFundMe, which is the largest crowdfunding website, is trying to address this. They say they are making some changes in light of that programme. They're going to bring in, as they put it, a new information hub. So the idea is after someone is diagnosed or a family member goes to start raising money, at that point they are directed, as they put it, to trusted scientific advice. And the site say they're going to work with doctors, going to work with patient groups to set that up. It should start in the next couple of months.
Okay. And they also said they have the power to blacklist clinics, do they?
Yeah, they do. So they have 2 powers. They said they do, in certain situations, have the power to blacklist some clinics, as you say. And also, if they want to, they say if a clinic breaks their terms and conditions or in some ways they believe it is not meeting standards, then at that point they can stop them using the GoFundMe logo and brand in marketing material and online as well.
Okay. Thank you. Part 2 of Jim's report, as he said, tomorrow on the programme. Right, with us to talk about the issues that Jim has raised today, Rose Gray, Policy Manager at Cancer Research UK. Also, Paula Newman, whose 9-year-old niece travelled to Mexico to be treated for a rare cancer of the brain. Paula stayed in the UK to crowdfund for the treatment and says the pressure of having to raise so much money in part led to the breakdown of her marriage. And her niece, the little girl, died aged 10. And Labour MP and one of the vice chairs of the all-parliamentary group on cancer, Ruth George, is here too. Welcome all of you. Thank you so much for coming on the programme. Paula, Lucy was your sister's little girl, was diagnosed with a rare childhood cancer in 2017. The prognosis for that is very poor. Lucy's mum had died and her dad, your brother-in-law, decided that they were going to go to Mexico for treatment. Tell us about that. How did you get to that decision?
Well, when Lucy was diagnosed with DIPG, we did an awful lot of research online. Joe, Lucy's father, spent a lot of time looking into if there were any options at all. We found a clinic in Mexico. We found a host of other clinics as well, but the one in Mexico seemed to be the one that everyone was flocking to. We actually asked Lucy where she'd like to go as well, and she said she'd like to go to Mexico. And so when we found the cost, it was obviously a shock.
Which was what?
Initially, the first treatment was around £15,000-16,000, but then the repeated treatments, which I didn't anticipate at first, could be up to £300,000.
Okay. And you took on the responsibility back here while Lucy and Joe were out there of trying to raise that money. What was that like for you?
I didn't really think ahead. It was a case of Lucy's got DIPG. This cancer is untreatable in the UK. The prognosis is completely dire. There was nothing that could be done, so this is something I have to do. I was quite savvy with social media. I'd seen, like in Jim's report, I'd seen it being successful online through Facebook and things like that. So I thought, well, obviously, if we've got no hope here, we have to give it a try.
And once the family makes that decision and you start the crowdfunding, are you all lifted by the fact that you're taking what you think is the initiative?
Absolutely. There is literally nothing else that you can do as a family.
Right.
And actually what it brought not only was the financial help that we needed to get Lucy over to Mexico, but also the absolute, I guess, onslaught of people supporting us and the community that just came together. It was absolutely incredible.
So it galvanises everybody?
Yes.
Because you're all going. We're not, you know, as we heard in Jim's talk, we can't accept this. We've got to do something. And people are really good at fundraising, actually, aren't they?
People are brilliant, yeah. And also, having lost my sister, very suddenly in 2012. We didn't get a chance to help her, so we had to help Lucy. We had the opportunity to help, and that was something that was huge for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So your sister's daughter, you think this I couldn't do anything for my sister. I'm going to do my damnedest to help
Absolutely.
a little girl.
That's what she would have wanted.
Yeah,
my sister.
The impact on you eventually of trying to continue to raise so much money, hundreds of thousands of pounds.
I mean, we were very successful financially. It didn't have a direct financial impact. Thankfully, my company that I still continue to work for was so supportive. You know, it was more of the emotional side of things that affected me, not getting the support I needed. You know, I was experiencing marital problems at the time, and I think it just accelerated the inevitable really for me, personally.
And you chose that clinic because I think you saw photos of other kids who'd been treated there, living their life with a reasonable quality of life.
Not only that, we'd spoken to the families. You know, social media also brings that opportunity to talk to other families who are going through the same thing. And they'd all said, you know, that the children were able to enjoy themselves in Mexico in the sunshine. They were going out for pizza and family meals, having quality time, and that's what Joe got with Lucy, and that's, you know, priceless.
Right. Claire says, my daughter Olivia died from DIPG, the same, in June 2018, 1 year after diagnosis. We looked into every clinical trial worldwide after the NHS said they had nothing to help her, and there was no guarantee anywhere that she would survive or even live a bit longer. We chose to make memories instead. This viewer on Facebook says, 5 years ago my father was battling pancreatic cancer, having been given 3 to 6 months to live in the October. He went to one of these clinics costing hundreds a night and thousands for the various treatments. He lasted until the end of May, having been diagnosed in the October, so just past the 6 months mark he'd been advised that he would live to. Did it extend his life? Probably, but with what quality? Mentally, he was never given the chance to come to terms with the diagnosis, as he always felt, even once paralysed, that he could beat it with this clinic's help. Let me bring in Rose from Cancer Research UK, and also Ruth, one of the vice chairs of the All Parliamentary Group on Cancer, Ruth George and Rose Gray. First of all, your reaction to the fact that one of the biggest crowdfunding website is now changing that website as a result of our investigation.
I think it's positive, and I think it's an incredibly important investigation and something we should be talking about. I do think it's part of a much bigger puzzle that we all need to kind of work towards. And for people in this situation, it's, you know, a desperate situation and the most difficult decision anyone has to make. And what we would say is just people should make sure they're informed as possible. So GoFundMe, taking action, is absolutely a part of that. If you've got so much emotion going on at the point of a cancer diagnosis, and scientific papers and the advice they provide are really important, but I think what people also need is just to be able to talk that through with their NHS doctors or with experts or with people they can trust that can explain this in a way that can aid them in their decision making.
Right. So Ruth, people would have people with a terminal diagnosis, and let's be honest, you know, we might all feel like that. You think, I can't take this, I'm not having this, there's got to be somewhere in the world that can help. But you think that those people should be able to take the latest research to their own NHS consultant and say, what do you think?
I do. I think that the NHS needs to be able to have professionals available, whether it's consultants or whether it's a trusted advisor, someone who can talk people through a terminal diagnosis and go on that journey with them, so they can make an informed choice between whether they want the quality of life that a clinic can offer them or whether they want to build those memories.
Right. Rose, there are exciting developments with the scientists that you fund, who are coming across new treatments, cutting edge treatments like immunotherapy, for example. I mean, it does make sense that people are out there researching what's potentially being trialled, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think ultimately, you know, Cancer Research UK and everyone here and everyone watching at home wants to see a day when no one has to make these decisions, and where there are treatment options available that will give them a great chance, and if not, where there are clinical trials, and that's why we fund the research that we do. I think it's a really difficult balance, because on the one side you do see these amazing advances, things like CAR-T, or you know, immunotherapy that we've seen announced recently, that completely transforms outcomes for people that otherwise would be facing a terminal diagnosis. The really difficult thing is the reality that we're only at the start of that. We're going to see more things happen, but if you're in that situation now, you know, it doesn't help you. So I think that's why it comes back to, you know, understanding all the evidence and speaking to your doctors to understand what is available, and importantly whether there's a clinical trial, because that's a brilliant way of accessing new treatments as well.
Okay. We have to leave it there. Thank you all very much. Thank you for coming on the programme. I've got more messages from you, which I will read during the course of the rest of the programme. But if you have crowdfunded for cancer treatment abroad, do let me know, and let me know what your experience was and whether you feel it was worth it. Thank you for your messages in response to Jim's investigation into crowdfunding for cancer treatments abroad. Sarah says, I want to thank you so much for highlighting this cancer crowdfunding issue. I'm a mum living with secondary breast cancer, and the pressure is immense to do everything possible, but you don't know whether it will really be worth it. A big shout out to the amazing NHS oncologists and all who've done so much for me. Part 2 of Jim's investigation tomorrow, 10 o'clock on BBC Two and the News Channel. Have a good day. Hello, it's Thursday, it's 10 o'clock on Victoria Derbyshire. Good morning. An exclusive investigation by this programme has found that British patients have spent millions of pounds at just one private cancer clinic in Germany. It doesn't publish data on the treatments it sells, nor what the outcomes for its patients are.
She could barely put one foot in front of the other sometimes, and for her to take herself away from her boys was heartbreaking. But her belief was she was doing this in the short term for the long term.
One British doctor has told us some treatments there are unproven, and he doesn't know how doctors at the clinic can sleep at night. Others said the clinic's talk of years of remission in some cases amounted to no more than false hope. And patients who've died after treatment there still feature on the clinic's website as success stories. Good morning. This time yesterday, we brought you our exclusive report about the extraordinary rise in the amount of money being raised online for private cancer treatment. £20 million we found just last year. And as a direct result of our investigation, the biggest crowdfunding site, GoFundMe, told us it's going to change its website to point fundraisers in the future to scientific research when it comes to cancer treatments. Today, we bring you part 2 of Jim Reed's investigation. This programme's found out that British patients have spent millions of pounds at just one private cancer clinic in Germany. It claims to offer state-of-the-art treatment, but our investigation has raised serious questions about some of the medication it offers and the promises it makes. One young woman who had treatment there and died last year still features on their website as a success story. Here's Jim's report.
It is, one family told us, a lovely place to be ill. The Hallwang in southern Germany looks more like a spa resort than a cancer clinic. This is where many British patients come each year, most after a terminal diagnosis. But clinics like this one come at a very high price. A single stay here can cost tens of thousands of pounds, and some families come not once, but time and time again.
What's all this medication dose?
In 2017, Stephen Powell's son was diagnosed with a brain tumour. Jaden was just 16 at the time. He had 2 operations, but the cancer kept returning. They were told nothing more could be done on the NHS.
It's happening a lot.
So the family raised hundreds of thousands for treatment at the Hallwang.
Get him out there, we hired a camper van. On a Thursday night, put him in a camper van. We'd drive out there, a 12-hour drive. We'd get there Friday morning, about 9 o'clock in Germany. They'd start his treatment. At this point, Jaden was knackered. Do your thumbs up. Ready? Smile. Thumbs up.
At the clinic, Jaden was given a mix of drugs, some of which were not licensed for NHS use on brain tumours. That included the medicine Avastin. Research shows it may lead to a small improvement in life expectancy, though the science is far from settled.
They'd sort Jaden out, pump all the Avastin in, the PD1, check him over, and then we'd sleep. And then come Saturday morning, they'd give him his other drugs he needed, if he needed any. And about midday, we'd head back to the UK.
And get back about Sunday lunchtime.
That's right. And then when we'd get back, I'd drop the camper van off Monday morning, then get to work and then worry about where's the next money coming from, how are we going to raise that.
After around a dozen trips to the clinic, Jayden died last summer, aged just 17. Stephen is positive about the level of care at the clinic and does think the treatment bought his son more time. But the costs were huge, eventually hitting more than £250,000, far more than he initially expected, though he does say the cancer was more complex than first thought.
It's a hell of a lot of money to find. You do think, Christ, when's it going to stop? The money, it was getting expensive, and the pressure, yeah, you think, my God. But you just got to keep going.
The Hallwang is the most high profile of dozens of private cancer clinics in Germany. It says it has one cancer doctor for every 2 or 3 patients and a nurse-patient ratio of almost 1:1. Doctors there can point to individual success stories, and we have spoken to one British man alive 5 years after a terminal diagnosis who says the Hallwang saved his life. But the clinic doesn't publish data on its treatments or its survival rates, so it's impossible to know for sure whether its results are any better than standard care in the UK.
Andrea was loyal, she was funny, she was a huge part of my life.
Claire's best friend, Andrea, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2016. A single mum with 2 young boys, she was told she had a year to live. The 2 friends flew together to Germany for treatment at the Hallwang.
The treatment, now they never promised her a cure, but they did believe they could get her into remission, which at best would have given her 5 years. And in those 5 years we weren't really sure of what could come about, and miracles do happen.
Other families say doctors at the Hallwang seem very careful to avoid the word cure, but they say phrases like remission and beating cancer are used in ways that doctors in the UK have told us is irresponsible. The Hallwang says it is honest about prognosis and does have its patients' best interests at heart. In a statement, it told us, "We never talk about cure, nor do we use phrases like beat it. Our medical team consists of oncologists, not sports commentators." But in a marketing video, still on the front page of the clinic's website, a British patient can clearly be heard using that phrase.
After speaking with the medical team, we decided that they said that they were very positive and that they could work with me to try and obviously beat my cancer.
As for Andrea, at the Hallwang, she was given a form of immunotherapy. This new type of drug uses the body's own immune system to destroy tumour cells.
She could barely put one foot in front of the other sometimes, and for her to take herself away from her boys was heartbreaking. But her belief was she was doing this in the short term for the long term.
New immunotherapy drugs have been shown to extend life in a minority of patients with skin and blood cancers, but pancreatic cancer is much harder to treat. 3 UK specialists we spoke to said it was extremely unlikely to have much effect. All said any talk of 5-year survival would have been false hope. Andrea's friends raised more than £200,000 for her treatment. She had paid for therapy in Belfast and made multiple trips to the Hallwang, but she died in August 2017, just over a year after she was diagnosed.
Do you think it was worth her going to that clinic?
The outcome was the same, but do I think it was worth it? I couldn't turn around and say it didn't help Andrea, but if we were faced with it again, would we do it? Yeah, because you don't know. It didn't have any success, and that maybe sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but I wouldn't want to take away hope for somebody else.
When it comes to experimental treatment, patients with a terminal diagnosis may of course be far more willing to take risks, and the NHS has been criticised in the past for being too conservative. But specialists we've spoken to say if a drug has not been tested and licensed for that type of cancer, the chances of it working are likely to be very low, and there's a risk of serious side effects.
I have one particular patient that went to that clinic, and they refused a lot of the conventional treatments over in the UK. They went there, they got a range of unusual treatments, and it's very sad to see that happen. I'm not actually certain how the doctors can really sleep at night when they give them treatments that are really not proven. I also never received a letter from that clinic. We never knew really what they were getting. We only got it from the patient. And when they came back with problems, we have to deal with that.
The Hallwang says immunotherapy is complex and not well understood by other doctors. It claims it has treated cancer patients now in full remission with drugs which have not been licensed to use on that cancer. And it says if it can extend the lives of some patients by a year or more, that should be considered a breakthrough.
When you're on this conveyor belt, you're living day by day.
In yesterday's programme, we heard from Helen. Her daughter Gemma was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She made numerous trips to the Hallwang with money raised by the actress Kate Winslet, as well as the family and the public. Gemma was given immunotherapy, and for a while it seemed to work. Scans back in the UK showed no sign of the tumours.
It's so mentally, physically, and whatever way you want to describe it, draining, going to Germany for treatment every 3 weeks. I just thought it was a good time to take a break.
Helen said they were told by the Hallwang to continue the treatment, but funds were getting low and they were worried there might be nothing left if the cancer came back. So they felt there was no choice but to stop their trips to Germany.
It's unsustainable. You cannot physically carry on or financially carry on doing that for the rest of your life. How could you? How can anybody do that?
Last summer, another scan showed the cancer had returned, this time in Gemma's spine. She died in October.
Coming back, that's the hard bit.
Helen is very grateful for the donations and for Kate Winslet's support. She thinks it did give her daughter more time, but looking back, she cannot be sure she did the right thing.
You know, it becomes your life. You do not do anything else except get on that plane, go and have your treatment, come and rest 3 weeks, get back on the plane, do it, and that's it. That's your life. There's no happy times. I do think to myself, should we have done the bucket list and spent the last few months of Gemma's life with her daughter trying to be happy and make memories. But it is what it is. It's done now. You can't go back.
On the Hallwang's website, Gemma's case is still being used as a success story. There is no mention of the fact she lost her life 5 months ago.
When people do pass away, they should be taken down and not used as marketing material. To use them in a positive manner, which is the only way it can be described as, to promote their story and get more people to go, is absolutely wrong.
But this clinic is just one of many in Germany and beyond. New technologies and new ways of funding mean the business of cancer care is booming, selling hope to patients faced with a frightening diagnosis and a difficult choice.
Jim Reid reporting. Athena on Twitter says, I totally understand the decision to crowdfund for treatment, but no data is collected, no evidence base is built, no future patients benefit. We must invest in research and work to change practice for all. I'm the CEO of a cancer research charity, and this crowdfunding is having an impact. And this email from Gerald is quite long. I'll read most of it. Good morning. I think you provided a very balanced perspective on this terribly complex issue. My daughter Elaine spent almost 5 months at the Hallwang Clinic before she sadly passed away last summer at the age of 35, leaving a 2-year-old little boy. She had a very rare sarcoma cancer that couldn't be treated any further in the UK. And Gerald says this particular clinic caters primarily for Brits using crowdfunding on top of their own resources. Most of the patients that were there with my daughter are no longer with us, and many families had taken on major financial commitments to fund treatment, and they're left financially challenged as a result. We funded ourselves but basically used up our savings, and if this treatment had continued, we would have struggled to be able to look after her son, who is now with us. These clinics are often opaque about likely ongoing costs and even more opaque about outcomes. What most people don't get is that even if these treatments work, you need to basically continue. And if you stop, you will probably die. These clinics, says Gerald, are unable to attract wealthy Germans, of whom there are many. We only saw one German there in 6 months. Without crowdfunding that doesn't really exist in Germany, these clinics would probably struggle. Thank you for those. Do keep them coming in.
Right, so that was both the pieces, one after the other. You've seen them completely clean now. I haven't tried to influence your thoughts in any way at this point. I'm saving that for the next video, where I'm going to cut in short sections of me saying, actually, that's a sweep misstatement, and I haven't backed it up with evidence. I'll look at that in my blog, and my points are. So you can watch the next video and see what it is I'm going to write without having to read all my boring words. But unfortunately, you will have to listen to me droning on. So I'm sorry about that. But what you've just watched, if you did watch them, are all of the 2 pieces that went out that I was interviewed and filmed for 4 hours. If you noticed, I got 10 seconds in the first one, and a couple of the comments in the second one I made, but I didn't get attributed for them. And I didn't feature at all in the second one, because I only have a positive tale about the Hallwang Clinic in Germany. Thank you.